Heart of the World by H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Prologue. Don Ignacio. The circumstances under which the following pages come to be printed are somewhat curious and worthy of record. Within the last few years, a certain English gentleman, whom we will call Jones, because it is not his name, chanced to be employed as the manager of a mine not far from the Usumacinto River, the upper reaches of which divide the Mexican state of Chiapas from the Republic of Guatemala. Now, life at a mine in Chiapas, though doubtless it has some compensations, does not altogether fulfill a European's ideal of happiness. To begin with, the work is hard, desperately hard, and though the climate is healthy enough among the mountains, there are valleys where men may die of fever. Of sport, strictly speaking, there is none, for the forests are too dense to hunt with any comfort, and, if they were not, the swarms of venomous insects of various degrees that haunt them would make this particular relaxation impossible. Society also, as we understand it, is conspicuous by its absence, and should a man chance to be married, he could not well bring his wife into regions that are still very unsettled, across forest paths, through rivers, and along the brinks of precipices, dangerous and impassable enough to strike terror to the heart of the stoutest traveller. When Mr. Jones had dwelt for a year at the mines of La Concepcion, the fact of his loneliness and a desire for acquaintances more congenial than the American clerk of the stores and his Indian labourers came home to him with some force. During the first months of his residence he had attempted to make friends with the owners of some neighbouring fincas or farms. This attempt, however, he soon gave up in disgust, for these men proved to be half-breeds of the lowest class, living in an atmosphere of monotonous vice. In this emergency, being a person of intelligence, Jones fell back upon intellectual resources and devoted himself, so far as his time would allow, to the collection of antiquities and to the study of such of the numerous ruins of pre-Aztec cities and temples as lay within his reach. The longer he pursued these researches, the more did they fascinate his imagination. Therefore, when he chanced to hear that on the farther side of the mountain, at the hacienda called Santa Cruz, there dwelt an Indian, Don Ignacio by name, the owner of the hacienda, who was reported to have more knowledge of Antiguos, their history and relics, than anybody else in this part of Mexico, he determined to visit him upon the first opportunity. This, indeed, he would have done before, for Don Ignacio boasted an excellent reputation, had it not been for the length of the journey to his home. Now, however, the difficulty was lessened by an Indian who offered to point out a practicable path over the mountain, which brought the hacienda of Santa Cruz to within 3 hours' ride on muleback from La Concepcion, in place of the 10 hours that were necessary to reach it by the more frequented road. Accordingly, one day in the dry season, when work was slack in the mine, owing to the water having fallen too low to turn the crushing mill, Jones started. This was on a Saturday, for on the Monday previous he had dispatched a runner to Don Ignacio announcing his intended visit, and received in reply a most courteous and well-written letter begging him to pass the next Sunday at the hacienda, where any English gentleman would always be most welcome. As he approached the hacienda, he was astonished to see the façade of an enormous white stone building of a semi-Moorish style of architecture, having towers and ornamented doorways at either end. in a large dome rising from the centre of its flat roof. Riding through the milpas, or cornfields, and groves of cocoa, the coffee bushes, all in a perfect state of cultivation, which covered many acres on every side of the building, Jones came to the gateway of a large patio, or courtyard, which grew several gigantic ceiba trees, throwing their grateful shade over the mouth of a well. From under these trees an Indian appeared, who evidently had been watching for his arrival, and, taking the horse, informed him with many salutations that the Señor Ignacio was at evensong with his people in the chapel yonder, according to his habit, but that the prayers would soon be finished. Leaving his horse in charge of the Indians, Jones went to the chapel, and, its great doors being open, he entered and sat down. So soon as his eyes became accustomed to the dim light, he perceived that the place was unusually beautiful, both in its proportions and its decorations. The worshippers also were many, perhaps they numbered 300, clearly all of them Indians employed upon the estate, and so intent were they upon their devotions that his entry was not even noticed. To his mind, however, the most curious object in the building was a slab of white marble let into the wall above the altar, whereon the following inscription was engraved in Spanish, in letters so large that he had no difficulty reading it: "Dedicated by Ignacio the Indian, to the memory of his most beloved friend, James Strickland, an English gentleman, and Maya, Princess of the Heart, his wife, whom first he met upon this spot. Pray for their souls of your charity, O passer-by." While Jones was wondering who this James Strickland and Maya, Princess of the Heart, might be, and whether it was his host who had set up the tablet to their memory, the priest pronounced his benediction, and the congregation began to leave the church. The first to pass its doors was an Indian gentleman, who Jones rightly took to be Don Ignacio himself. He was a man of about 60 years, but one who looked much older than his age, for sorrow, hardship, and suffering had left their marks upon him. In person he was tall and spare, nor did a slight lameness detract from the dignity of his bearing. His dress was very simple and quite innocent of the finery and silver buttons which have so much attraction for the Mexican mind, consisting as it did of a sombrero of Panama straw, with a black ribbon in place of the usual gilt cord, a clean white jacket and shirt, a black tie fastened in a bow, a pair of drab-coloured trousers, and brown boots of European make. Indeed, the only remarkable thing about Don Ignacio was his face. Never, thought Jones, had he beheld so beautiful a countenance, or, to be more accurate, one that gave him such assurance of its owner's absolute goodness and purity of nature. The features were those of a high-bred Indian, thin and delicately cut, the nose aquiline, the cheekbones and brow prominent, while beneath the latter shone a pair of large and soft black eyes, so tender and trustful in their expression that they seemed almost out of place in the face of a man. He stood by the door of the chapel in the light of the setting sun, leaning somewhat heavily on a stick, while the Indians filed past him. Every one of these, man, women, and child, saluted him with the utmost reverence as they went, some of them, especially the children, kissing his long and finely shaped hand when they bade him good night in terms of affection such as "Father," and called on the saints to guard him. Jones, watching them, reflected upon the difference of their attitude from that of the crouching servility which centuries of oppression have induced in the race towards any master of white blood, and wondered to what his host's influence over them was due. It was at this moment that Don Ignacio turned and saw him. 1,000 pardons, señor," he said in Spanish, with a shy and singularly engaging smile, as he lifted his sombrero, showing his long hair, which, like his pointed beard, was almost white. "You must indeed have thought me rude, but it is my custom at the end of a week's work to attend worship with the peons. Do not press round in noble English, my children. Also, I did not think that you would arrive before the sun was down." "Oh, pray don't apologise, señor," answered Jones. "I have been much interested in watching all your servants at their devotions. What a beautiful chapel this is! May I look at it before you shut the doors?" "Certainly, señor. Like the rest of the house, it is fine. The old monks who designed it 200 years ago, for this was a great monastery, knew how to build, and labour was forced in those days and cost nothing. Of course, I have repaired it a great deal, for those who lived here before me did not trouble much about such things. You would scarcely think, señor, that in the old days, 20 years ago, this place was a nest of highway robbers, smugglers, and manslayers, and that these people whom you see tonight, or their fathers, were slaves with no more rights than a dog. But it is so. Many a traveller has lost his life in this house or in its neighbourhood. Once I myself was nearly murdered here. Look at the carving of that altarpiece. It is fine, is it not? Those sapote wood columns date from the time of the old monks. Well, I have known Don Pedro Moreno, my predecessor, to tie human beings to them in order to brand them with red-hot irons." "To whom does that inscription refer?" asked Jones, pointing to the marble slab which has been described. Don Ignatio's face grew very sad as he answered: "It refers, señor, to the greatest friend I ever had, the man who saved my life at the risk of his own when I came by this limp, and one who was dear to me with a love passing the love of women. But there was a woman who loved him also, an Indian woman too, and he cared for her more than he did for me, as was right, for has not God decreed that a man should leave his friends, yes, his father and mother even, to cleave unto his wife?" "He married her then?" said Jones, who was growing interested. "Oh, yes, he married her, and in a strange place and fashion. But it is an old story, señor, and with your permission I will not tell it. Even to think of it revives too many painful memories, memories of death and loss, and disappointed ambition, and high hopes unfulfilled. Perhaps one day, if I have the courage and live long enough, I will write it all down. Indeed, some years ago I made a beginning, but it wearied me, and what I wrote seemed foolishness, so I gave up the task. I have lived a rough life, señor, and met with many adventures in it, though, thanks be to God, my latter years have been spent in peace. Well, it is coming to an end now, and were it not for the thought that my people here may fall into evil hands when I am gone, that would not trouble me. But come, señor, you are hungry, and the good father who has promised to eat with us must ride tonight to celebrate a mass tomorrow at a village 3 leagues away, so I have ordered supper early. The porter with your bag arrived safely. It has been placed in your chamber. The abbot's room it is called, and if you will follow me I will show you a short path to it from the chapel." Then he led the way to a little door in the wall. Unlocking this door, he passed up some narrow stairs, at the head of which was a landing place with a window, or rather grille, so arranged that, while it was invisible from below, an observer standing there could hear and see all that passed in the chapel. "This was the place," said Don Ignacio, "where the old abbots kept secret watch upon the monks, and it was here that once I saw a sight which I am not likely to forget." Then he passed on through several long and intricate passages till he came to a sitting room filled with handsome old Spanish furniture. "Your sleeping place lies beyond, señor," he said, opening another door that led into a large and dreary-looking chamber, lighted by heavily barred windows, of which the sills were not less than 10 feet from the ground. On the walls were frescoes of the Last Judgment, and the scenes inspired by the bloody drama of the Inquisition, grim to look on and somewhat injured by damp, but executed with great power and vivid, if distorted, imagination. Below the centre window, and reaching to within 3 feet of the floor, was an ancient full-length portrait of one of the abbots of the monastery, life-size and painted in oils upon a panel representing a man of fierce and evil countenance, over whose tonsured head the Holy Spirit was shown hovering in the shape of a dove. For the rest of the room was well, if lightly, furnished, and boasted the luxury of squares of matting laid upon the brick floor. "I fear that you will think this but a dismal apartment, señor," said Don Ignacio. "Still, it is our guest chamber. Moreover, there is a room attached with which I thought might be useful to you to write in, should you wish to do so. The people here say that the place is haunted, but I know you Englishmen do not bother about such things. It is not wonderful, however, that they talk thus, seeing that murders were done in this chamber in the time of Don Pedro Moreno. Indeed, he laid a plot to kill me and my friend here, and though he did not succeed in that instance, when I came into possession afterwards I found several skeletons beneath the floor, 2 of them, I remember, just where the bed stands now, and gave them decent burial." Jones, as in honour bound, declared himself to be totally indifferent to representation of tortures of the Inquisition, memories of departed abbots, skeletons of murdered men beneath the floor, ghosts, and hoc genus omni. Still, though he never confessed it to his host, his first night in the abbot's chamber, owing probably to the strong coffee which he had drunk, was not altogether a pleasant experience. In after days, however, he became well accustomed to the place, and indeed preferred it to any other room in the /hacienda. In contrast to the rude and ill-dressed fare with which Jones was fain to satisfy himself at the mine, Don Ignatio's supper was a feast worthy of Epicurus, especially as it was free from the horrible messes compounded of oil and the inward parts of animals that figure so largely in Mexican cookery. After their meals, cigars and black coffee were handed round, of which the raw materials had been grown on the estate, and never in his life did Jones smoke better tobacco. When the /padre/, a gentle and well-informed man, had departed, Jones began to speak of the antiquities of the country. Soon he found that his host's knowledge of the subject had not been exaggerated, seeing that he was even able to decipher hieroglyphic writings of which the key was supposed to be lost, and to give an outline of the history of the races who built the great temples and palaces, whereof so many ruins are to be found in the Palenque district. "It is sad to think," said Jones presently, "that nothing in which the breath of life remains is left of all this civilization. If only the old legend of the Golden City, hidden away somewhere in the unexplored recesses of Central America, were true, I think that I would give 10 years of my existence to visit it. It would be a glorious thing to step back into the past, to see a system at work, and mingle with people of which the world has lost all count and knowledge. For, let the imagination be active as it will, it is practically impossible to reconstruct these things from ruins and traditions. In fact, Don Ignacio, I do not understand how it is that you, who have never seen the Antiguos in the flesh, can talk about them so certainly. If I had never seen them, señor, he answered quietly, it would be wonderful. Indeed, you might be justified in setting me down as a teller of tales. But it chances that I have seen the golden city of fable and its civilization, and I can assure you that its wonders were far greater than any that have been told of in legend, or even by the Spanish romancers. "What?" gasped Jones. "What? Have I been drinking too much of your excellent wine? Am I asleep, or did I hear you say that you, the gentleman sitting before me, with your own eyes had seen the secret city of the Indians?" "You heard me say so, señor, though I did not in the least expect you to believe me. Indeed, it is because I cannot bear to be thought a liar that I have never said anything of this story, and for this same reason I shall not repeat it to you, since I do not wish that one whom I hope will become my friend should hold me in contempt. In truth, I am sorry that I have spoken so freely, but in support of my veracity I will beg you to remember that among the huge forests, wildernesses, and sierras of Central America, where no white man has set his foot, and whence the Indians vanished generations since, there is room for many ancient cities. Why, señor, within 200 miles or less of where we sit tonight there exists tribes of Lacondones, or unbaptized Indians, who have never seen a white man, and who still follow their fathers' faiths. No, señor, that story shall never be told, at any rate in my lifetime, for I have nothing to show in proof of it, or at least only one thing." "What is it?" asked Jones eagerly. "Oh, you shall see it if you wish, señor," his host answered, and left the room. Presently he returned with a little leather bag, from which he extracted a very curious and beautiful ornament. It was a great emerald, by far the largest that Jones had ever seen uncut, but highly polished. This stone, which was set in pure gold, obviously had formed the clasp of a belt, and could also be used as a seal, for on it, cut in intaglio, was the mask of a solemn and death-like human face, surrounded by hieroglyphic inscription, while on the reverse were other hieroglyphics. "Can you read this writing?" asked Jones, when he examined the ornament. "Ah, yes, señor. The words in front are, 'O eyes and mouth, look on me, plead for me.' And those on the back, 'Heart of heaven, be thou my home.'" "It is wonderful," said Jones, restoring the relic with a sigh, for he would have given anything that he had down to his shoes to possess it. "And now will you not make an exception in my favour and tell me the story?" "I fear that I cannot oblige you, señor," Don Ignacio answered, shaking his head. "But," pleaded Jones, "having revealed so much, it is cruel to hide the rest." "Señor," said his host, "will you take some more coffee? No? Then shall we walk a little on the roof and look at the view? It is pretty by moonlight, and the roofs here are wonderful, all built of solid stone. There is a tradition that the old monks used to dine on them in summer. They have a loopholed wall round them, whence that abbot whose portrait hangs in your sleeping chamber beat back a great attack of Indians whom his oppression stirred into rebellion. Tomorrow I shall hope to show you round the lands which have repaid me well for my 20 years of cultivation. Everybody in Mexico runs after mines, but its soil is the richest mine of all. I knew that, and seeing the capacities of the place, I sold the other emeralds which went with this clasp. They were fine stones, but unengraved, and therefore of no particular interest, and bought it cheap enough. Now that the country is more settled and I have planted so much, its value has become great, and will be greater still when all the young cocoa bushes are in full bearing a few years hence. There, thanks to the saints, the stair is done. Of late my back hurts me when I climb up steps. The air is sweet, is it not, señor, and the prospect pleasing? Look, the river shines like silver. Ah, how beautiful is God's world! It makes me sad to think of leaving it. But doubtless He will provide still finer places for us to work and serve Him in, gardens where sin and grief cannot enter. Surely there is room enough yonder, and he nodded toward the sky. This was but the first of many nights that Jones spent under Don Ignatio's hospitable roof, where, as the months went by, he grew more and more welcome. Soon he conceived a great affection for the grave, sweet-natured, kindly old Indian gentleman, whose mind seemed to be incapable of any evil thought, and whose chief ambitions were to improve his land and do good to all about him, more especially to his Indian servants or peons. In the beginning of their intimacy they made several expeditions together to inspect ruins in the neighbourhood, and once Don Ignacio came to stay with him in the mine of La Concepcion, where his visit proved to be of the greatest use to Mr. Jones and the company he served. One of the difficulties in working this particular mine lay in the scarcity of labour. At a word from Don Ignacio, this trouble vanished. He sent for a cacique who lived in the mountains and spoke to him, and lo, within a week 50 stalwart Indians appeared to offer their services at the mine, thus affording one of many instances that came to Jones's knowledge of his friend's extraordinary influence among the natives. As time went on, however, these excursions ceased, since Don Ignatio's health grew too feeble to allow him to leave the /hacienda. At length, it was when they had been acquainted for nearly 2 years, a messenger arrived at the mine one morning, saying that he was instructed by his master, Don Ignacio, to tell the Señor Jones that he lay dying and would be glad to see him. He was to add, however, that if it should be in any way inconvenient, Señor Jones must not trouble himself to come for so small a matter, as his master had written a letter which would be delivered to him after his death. Well, needless to say, Señor Jones travelled across the mountains as fast as the best mule he owned would carry him. On arriving at the /hacienda, he found Don Ignacio lying in his room, almost paralyzed and very weak, but perfectly clear-headed, and much rejoiced to see him. "I am about to make my last journey, my friend," he said, "and I am glad, for late I have suffered a great deal of pain in my back, the result of an ancient injury. Also, it is time that a helpless old man should make room for one more active," and he looked at his visitor strangely and smiled. Jones, whose feelings were touched, made the usual reply as to his having many months to live, but Don Ignacio cut him short. "Don't waste time like that, friend," he said, "but listen. Ever since we knew each other, you have been trying to extract from me the story of how I came to visit the city, heart of the world, and of my friend James Strickland, whom, thanks be to God, I shall see again so soon. Well, I never would tell it to you, though once or twice I nearly did. So when I saw how my silence chagrined you, partly because I pride myself on being able to keep a secret when pressed to reveal it, also because I am selfish, and knew that so soon as you had heard my story, you would cease to interest yourself in a stupid, failing old man. For who is there that cares about the Rhine when he has sucked the orange? Oh, and there were other reasons. For instance, I could not have related that history without displaying unseemly emotion, and I know that you Englishmen despise such exhibitions. Lastly, if I told it all, I desired to tell it fully and carefully, keeping everything in proportion, and this it would have been difficult to do by word of mouth. Yet I have not wished to disappoint you altogether, and I have wished that some record of the curious things which I have seen in my life should be preserved, though this last desire alone would not have been sufficiently strong to move me to the task which I finished 10 days ago, before the paralysis crept into my arm. May I trouble you to open that cupboard near the foot of the bed, and give to me that pile of writing that you will find in it? 1,000 thanks. Here, señor, in these pages, if you care to take the trouble to read them, is set out an account of how I and my English friend came to visit the Golden City, of what we saw and suffered there, and of some other matters which you may think superfluous, but that are not without their bearing upon the tale. I fear that my skill in writing is small, still perhaps it may serve its turn, and if not, it matters nothing, seeing that you seek the spirit, not the letter, and are not sufficient of a Spanish scholar to be too critical. Now, take the book and put it away, for the very sight of it wearies me, recalling the hours of labour that I have spent on it. Also, I wish to talk of something more important. Tell me, my friend, do you propose to stop in this country or return to England? Oh, return to England. Why should I starve where there are no mines to manage? No, I'm too poor. Then would you return if you were rich? Asked the dying man anxiously. Oh, I do not know. It depends, but I think that I have been too long away to go to live in England for good. I am glad to hear that, friend, for I may as well tell you at once that I have made you my heir, so that henceforth you will be a wealthy man, as we understand wealth in this country. You have made me your heir? Stammered Jones. Yes, why should I not? I like you well, and know you to be a good and honest man. I have no relations and no friends, and above all, I am sure that you will deal justly and gently by my people here, for I have watched your bearing towards those who work under you at the mine. Moreover, I have conditions to make which will not be the less binding on you because they are not set out in the will, namely, that you should live here yourself and carry on the work that I have begun, for so long as may be possible, and that, if you are forced to sell the place by any unforeseen circumstance, or to leave it away by testament, you should do so to an Englishman only, and one of whom you know something. Do you accept?" "Indeed, yes, and I know not how to thank you." "Oh, do not thank me at all. Thank your own character and honest face, which have led me to believe that I can make no better disposal of my property. Now go, for I am tired. But come to me again tomorrow morning after the priest has left." So Jones, who had entered that room possessed of a hard-earned 800 a year, departed from it the owner of a property which before long became worth as many thousands annually as any who have visited him at Santa Cruz can testify. 3 days later Don Ignacio passed away peacefully, and was laid to rest in the chapel of the hacienda. This, then, was how the story of the city, heart of the world, and of Don Ignacio and his friend James Strickland, who saw it, came into the hands of him whom we have called Jones. Here follows a translation of the manuscript. End of prologue. By H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 1. How the Plot Failed. I, Ignacio, the writer of this history, being now a man in my 62nd year, was born in a village among the mountains that lie between the little town of Pichachalco and Tiapa. Of all that district, my father was the hereditary cacique, and the Indians there loved him much. When I was a lad, perhaps 9 years old, troubles arose in the country. I never quite understood them, or I may have forgotten the circumstances, for such things were always happening. But I think that they were caused by some tax which the government at Mexico had imposed upon us unjustly. Anyhow, my father, a tall man with fiery eyes, refused to pay a tax, and after a while a body of soldiers arrived, mounted upon horses, who shot down a great number of people and took away some of the women and children. Of my father they made a prisoner, and next day they led him out, while my mother and I were forced to look on, and sat him on the edge of a hole that they had dug, holding guns to his head, and threatening to shoot him unless he would tell them a secret which they were anxious to learn. All he said, however, was that he wished that they would kill him at once, and so free him from the torment of the mosquitoes which hummed around him. But they did not kill him then, and that night they put him back in prison, where I was brought to visit him by the padre, Ignacio, his cousin and my godfather. I remember that he was shut up in a dirty place, so hot that it was difficult even to breathe, and that there were some drunken Mexican soldiers outside the door, who now and again threatened to make an end of us Indian dogs. My godfather, the priest Ignacio, confessed my father in the corner of the cell, and took something from his hand. Then my father called me to him and kissed me, and with his own fingers, for a few moments, he hung about my neck that thing which the priest had taken from him, only to remove it again and give it to Ignacio for safe keeping, saying, "See that the boy has it, and its story with it, when he comes of age." Now my father kissed me again, blessing me in the name of God, and as he did so great tears ran down his face. Then the priest Ignacio took me away, and I never saw my father any more, for the soldiers shot him next morning and threw his body into the hole that they had dug to receive it. After this, my godfather, cousin, and namesake Ignacio took me and my mother to the little town of Tiapa, of which he was priest, but she soon died there of a broken heart. In Tiapa we lived in the best house in the place, for it was built of stone and set upon a bank overhanging a beautiful rushing river, with water that was always clear as glass, however much it rained, which river ran 100 feet or more below the windows. About Tiapa there is little to say, except that in those days the people were, for the most part, thieves, and such great sinners that my cousin, the padre, would not shrieve some of them even on their deathbeds. There was a church, however, whereof the roof was overgrown with the most beautiful orchids. Also, the roads were so bad that, except in the dry season, it was difficult to travel either to or from the town. Here in this forgotten place I grew up, but not without education, as might have been expected, seeing that my cousin was a good scholar and did all he could to keep me out of mischief. When I was about 15 years of age, of a sudden a desire took hold of me to become a priest. It was in this wise. One Sunday evening I sat in the church of Tiapa, looking now at the sprays of orchid flowers that swung to and fro in the breeze outside the window, and now at the votive pictures on the walls, offerings made by men and women who had called upon their patron saints in the hour of danger and had been rescued by them. Here from the fire there were murderers, and here again from drowning. They were rude and superstitious daubs, but doubtless acceptable to God, who could see in them the piety and gratitude of those that out of their penury had caused them to be painted. As I sat thus idly, my godfather, the good priest, began to preach. Now it chanced that 2 nights before there had been a dreadful murder in Tiapa. 3 travellers and a boy, the son of one of them, passing from Cristobal to the coast, stopped to spend the night at a house near our own. With them they brought a mule load of dollars, the price of the merchandise that they had sold at San Cristobal, which some of our fellow townsmen, half-breeds of wicked life, determined to steal. According to the number of 10, these assassins broke into the house where the travellers lodged, and meeting with resistance, they cut down the 3 of them with machetes and possessed themselves of the silver. Just as they were leaving, one of the thieves perceived the boy hiding beneath a bed, and dragging him out, they killed him also, lest he should bear witness against them. Now those who had done this deed of shame were well known in the town. Still none were arrested, for they bribed the officers with part of their booty. But my godfather, seeing some of them present in the church, took for his text the commandment, "Thou shalt do no murder." Never have I heard a finer sermon. Indeed, before it was finished, 2 of the men rose and crept from the church, conscience-stricken, and when the preacher described the slaughter of the lad whom their wicked hands had of a sudden hurled into eternity, many of the congregation burst into tears. I tell this story because it was then for the first time, as I thought of the murdered boy, who some few days before had been as full of life as I myself, that I came to know what death meant, and to understand that I also must die and depart for ever either into heaven or hell. I shook as the thought struck me, and it seemed to me that I saw death standing at my elbow, as he stands today. And then and there I determined that I would be a priest and do good all my life, in order that I might find peace at the last and escape the fate of the evil. On the morrow I went to my godfather's room and told him of my desire. He listened to me attentively and answered, I would that it might be so, my son, holding as I do that the things of the world to come outweigh those of this present earth 10,000-fold. But it cannot be, for reasons that you shall learn when you are older. Then, when my trust is ended, you may make your choice, and if you still wish it, become a priest." 5 more years passed away, during which time I grew strong and active, and skilled in all manly exercises. Also I studied much under the teaching of my godfather, who sent even to Spain to buy me books. Among these books were many histories of my own race, the Indians, and of their conquest by the Spaniards, all that had been published indeed. Of such histories I never tired, although it maddened me to read of the misfortunes and cruel oppression of my people, who today were but a nation of slaves. At length, on my 20th birthday, my godfather, who now was grown very old and feeble, called me into his chamber, and having locked the door, he spoke to me thus: "My son, the time has come when I must deliver to you the last message of your beloved father, my cousin and best friend, who was murdered by the soldiers when you were a little child, and tell you of your descent and other matters. First, then, you must know that you are of royal and ancient blood, for your forefather in the 11th degree was none other than Cuauhtémoc, the last of the Aztec emperors whom the Spaniards murdered, which descent I can prove to you by means of old writings and pedigrees. Also it is known and attested among the Indians, who even now do not forget the stock whence sprang their kings." "Then by right I am Emperor of Mexico," I said proudly, for in my folly it seemed a fine thing to be sprung from a man who once had worn a crown. "Alas, my son," the old priest answered sadly, "in this world might is the only right, and the Spaniards ended that of your forefathers long ago by aid of torture and the noose. Save that it will earn you reverence among the Indians, it is but a barren honour which you inherit with your blood. Yet there is one thing that has come down to you from your ancestor Cuauhtémoc and the monarchs who ruled before him. Perchance you remember that on the night previous to his death your father set an amulet upon your neck, and, removing it again, gave it to me to keep. Here is that amulet." Then he handed me a trinket made of the half of a heart-shaped emerald, smooth with wear but unpolished, that if joined to its missing section would have been as large as a dove's egg. This stone was not broken, but cut from the top to the bottom, the line of separation being so cunningly sawn that no man, unless he had one half before him, could imitate the other. The charm was bored through so as to be worn upon a chain, and engraved upon its surface were some strange hieroglyphics and the outline of half a human face. "What is it?" I asked. The old priest shrugged his shoulders and answered: "A relic which had to do with their wicked heathen magic rites, I suppose. I know little about it, except that your father told me it was the most valued possession of the Aztec kings, and that the natives believe that when the two halves of this stone come together, the men of white blood will be driven from Central America, and an Indian emperor shall rule from sea to sea." "And where is the other half, father?" "How should I know?" he answered testily, "who have no faith in such stories, or in stones with the heads of idols graven upon them. I am a priest, and therefore your father told me little of the matter, since it is not lawful that I should belong to secret societies. Still, some such society exists, and in virtue of the ownership of that talisman you will be head of it, as your ancestors were before you, though, as far as I can learn, the honour brought them but little luck. I know no more about it, but I will give you letters to a certain Indian who lives in the district of which your father was /cacique, and when you show him the stone, doubtless he will initiate you into its mysteries, though I counsel you to have nothing to do with them. Listen, Ignacio, my son, you are a rich man. How rich I cannot tell you, but for many generations your forefathers have hidden up treasures for an object which I must explain, and the gold will be handed over to you by those of your clan in whose keeping it is. It was because of this treasure that your father and your great-grandfather were done to death, with many others, since the rumour of it came to the ears of those who ruled in Mexico, who, when they failed to force its secret from them, tormented and killed them in their rage. Now, this was the message of your father to you concerning the wealth which he and his ancestors had hidden. Tell my son Ignacio, should he live to grow up, that there has never departed from our family the desire to win back the crown that Guatemoc lost, or at least to drive out the accursed Spaniards and their spawn, and to establish an Indian republic. To this end we have heaped up wealth for generations, that it might serve us when the hour was ripe. And because of this wealth, of which the whisper could not altogether be hid in a land which is full of spies, some of us have come to cruel deaths, as I am about to die tonight. But I shall die keeping my secret, and when my son grows up, others will rule at Mexico, or the matter may have been forgotten. At least the gold will be where I left it. Now say to my son that it is my hope that he will use it in the cause to further which it has been amassed, that he will devote his life to the humbling of our white masters and to the uplifting of the race which for centuries they have robbed, murdered, and enslaved. Nevertheless, say to him that I lay no commands upon him as to these matters, seeing that he must follow his own will about them, for I cannot forget that from generation to generation those who went before him have reaped nothing but disaster in their struggle against the white devils, whom, because of the sins and idolatry of our forefathers, it has pleased God to set over us. Those were your father's words, my son, which he spoke to me in the hour of his murder. Now you will understand why I said that you must wait before you are determined to be a priest. If that is still your wish, it can be fulfilled, for your father left it to you to follow whatever life you might desire." When he had finished speaking, I thought for a while and answered, "So long as my father's blood is unavenged, I cannot become a priest." "It is as I feared," said the old man with a sigh. "That cursed talisman which lies about your neck has begun its work with you, Ignacio, and you will tread the path that the others trod, perchance to die in blood as they died. Oh, why cannot man be content to leave the righting of wrongs and the destinies of nations in the hands of the Almighty and His angels? Because, for good or evil, the Almighty chooses men to be His instruments," I answered. Within a week from this day some Indians came to Tiapa, disguised as porters, whose mission it was to lead me to the mountains among which my father had lived, and where his treasures still lay hidden. Bidding farewell to my godparent, the priest, who wept when we parted from me, I started upon my journey, keeping my destination secret. As it chanced, I never saw him more, for a month later he was seized with some kind of calentura or fever and died suddenly. The best thing I can say of him is that, with one exception, there lives no man in heaven above whom I desire so greatly to meet again. On the third day of my journey we reached a narrow pass in the mountains, beyond which lay an Indian village. Here my guides took me to the house of one Antonio, to whom the Padre Ignacio had given me letters, an old man of venerable aspect, who greeted me warmly and made me known to several /caciques who were staying with him, I knew not why. So soon as we were alone in the house, one of these /caciques, after addressing me in words which I could not understand, asked me if I had a heart. To this I replied that I hoped so, whereat they all laughed. Then the man Antonio, coming to me, unbuttoned my shirt, revealing the talisman that had belonged to my father, and at the sight of it the company bowed. Next the doors were locked, and sentries having been posted before them, a ceremony began which even now it is not lawful that I should describe in detail. On this solemn occasion I was first initiated into the mysteries of the Order of the Heart, and afterwards installed as its hereditary chief, thus becoming, while yet a boy, the absolute lord of many thousand men, brethren of our society, who were scattered far and wide about the land. On the day after I had taken the final oaths, Antonio handed over to me the treasure that my ancestors hoarded in a secret place which my father had left in his keeping, and it was a great treasure amounting to more than $1 million in value. Now I was rich, both in men and money. Still following the counsel of Antonio, I abode for a while in the village, receiving those who came from every part of Mexico to visit me as holder of the heart, and as first in rank among the fallen peoples of the Indians. It was during these 3 months that I made the great error of my life. Some 3 miles from the village where I dwelt lived 2 sisters, Indian sisters of noble blood, though poor, one of them a widow, and the other a very beautiful girl, younger than myself. I chanced that, riding past their house upon a certain Sunday evening, when most of the inhabitants of the valley were away at a fiesta, I heard screams coming from it. Dismounting from my horse, I ran in at the door, which was open, and saw one of the sisters, a widow, lying dead upon the ground, while 2 bandits, Mexicans, were attacking the younger woman. Drawing my /machete, I cut down the first of them before he had time to turn. Then I turned upon the second man with such fury that I drove him back against the wall. Seeing that his life was in danger, he called upon me not to kill him for the sake of a low Indian girl, which insult maddened me so that I slew him upon the spot, and caused his body, with that of his companion, to be buried secretly. It happened that after this the girl whose life I had saved came to dwell in my village, where I saw much of her. So lovely was she, and so clever, that soon she won my heart, and the end of it was that, being headstrong and in love, I married her against the advice of Antonio and others of my brethren of the order. It would have been better for the Indian people, and perhaps for me also, if I had died before I stood at the altar with this woman, though for a while she was a good wife, and because of her cleverness a great service to me at the time. Now it must be stated that during all these months I had not been idle. The more I thought of them, the more wrongs of my countrymen, the real owners of the land, took hold of my mind, till at length they possessed it utterly, and I became an enthusiast and a dreamer. This was the object of my life, to form a great conspiracy which should bring about a rising of the Indians in every province of Mexico upon a given day. Then, when the Spaniards and their bastards, the Spanish Mexicans, had been stamped out, to re-establish the empire of the Aztecs. It was a madness, perhaps, but the madness lurked in my blood. My forefathers had suffered from and for it, and I think it must have come down to us from our ancestors Guatemoc, the greatest and the most unfortunate Indian who ever lived. Where they failed, I determined to succeed, and, strange to say, in the end I went near to success. For years I laboured, travelling to and fro about the land, till there was no province where I was not known as the holder of the heart, and the chief by blood of the Indian tribes. Everywhere I strove to rouse the people from their sloth, and to win the /caciques/, or headmen, to the cause, and I did not strive in vain. I used my great wealth to buy arms, to gain over the lukewarm with bribes, and in many other ways. When my fortunes sank low, I gathered more, for without gold nothing could be done. Treasures that were buried in the old days were given up to me as Lord of the Heart by those who had their secret. Also, many brought me money, each what he could spare, and I hoarded it against the hour of need. For a year or more I was the greatest power in Mexico, yet, though hundreds were privy to my plot, it was so well hidden that no whisper of it came to the ears of the government. At length all was ready, and so carefully were my plans laid that success seemed certain. But the unforeseen happened, and I failed. Thus, that woman whose life I had saved, my own wife, whom I loved and trusted, who was bound to my cause and that of her countrymen by every tie, human and divine, betrayed me and it. Just before the time fixed for the rising, it was agreed that she should be placed as one of whom we could be sure to play the part of a servant in the house of a man who ruled Mexico in those days, that she might spy upon him. Instead of doing so, she, my wife, fell in love with him. It is so easy to guess the rest. One night, but a week before the appointed time, I and some 5 or 6 others, the leaders of our party, were seized. My companions were made away with secretly, but I was brought before the great man, who received me alone, holding a pistol in his hand. "I know of your plans, friend," he said, "and I congratulate you on them, for they were cleverly managed. I know also that you have great treasure in gold hidden away," and he named the sum. "That wife of yours, whom you were fool enough to trust, has told me everything, but she cannot tell me where the money is hidden, for this you withhold from her, which shows that you are not altogether mad. Now, friend, I make you this fair offer. Hand over this treasure, and you shall go free. Of course, when the day of vengeance is past, and your sheep have found themselves without a shepherd, nor shall you be molested afterwards. Refuse to do so, and you will be brought to trial and die as you deserve." "How can you promise for others?" I asked. "You are not the only white man who would have fallen." "I can promise for others, first, because I am their master, and secondly, because nobody but myself knows anything of this matter, since if I told them I must also share your wealth with them, and that, friend, I mean to keep. Give it up to me, and you may go and plot against my successors and the government of Mexico as much as pleases you, and take your wife with you for aught I care. For, friend, having earned so comfortable a competence, I propose to leave a land where, as this business proves, people in authority are too apt to have their throats cut. Now choose, and be so good as to stand quite still while you are thinking the matter over, or I may be forced to shoot you." "How about my associates?" I asked. "I believe that 3 or 4 of them have been carried off by typhus within the last day or 2. The prisons here are so unhealthy. But I am sure that if the gold is forthcoming, no more will sicken." Then I chose, for I thought to myself that I might get more gold, but I could never get another life, and if I died many must suffer with me, and all my hopes for the future of the Indian race would come to naught. Also I knew that this villain to be a man of his word, and that what he promised he would fulfil. Within 10 days he had the money, and I was free to begin my life again, nor did any of those who were doomed to perish in it learn the tale of the plot that had threatened them. I was free, but what a freedom was this, when I had lost everything save the breath that God placed in my nostrils, and perhaps my honour. The great house that I had builded was fallen to the ground. The moneys I had amassed were quite stolen. The chief of my companions were dead. My credit as a deliverer of the people was gone, and my cause had become hopeless. All these things had come upon me because of a woman, a traitress whom I had nurtured in my bosom. At first I was dazed, but when I came to understand, I swore a great oath before heaven that for her false sake I would hate and renounce her sex, that whatever might be the temptation, never again would I look kindly upon women, or have to do with one of them in word or thought or deed. That oath, so far as lay in my power, I have kept to this day, and I hope to keep through all eternity. It may be asked what became of my wife. I do not know. I lifted no hand against her who was flesh of my flesh, but she perished. The story was known. I was forced to tell it clear myself. After I escaped from the prison, I lay ill for many weeks, and when I recovered, she was gone. Others had been betrayed beside myself, and doubtless some of them had wreaked fitting vengeance on her. What it was I never asked. For many years, 20 perhaps, I became a wanderer. Now, as before, the Indians loved me, and as Lord of the Heart and their hereditary /cacique, in a sense I was still great, although but the shadow of power dwelt with me. The substance had departed, as it departs ever from those who fail. From time to time I strove to rebuild the plot, but now that I was friendless and without fortune, few would follow me thus far. So it came about that at length I abandoned the endeavour and lived as best I could. I fought in 3 wars, gaining honours therein, and took my share in many adventures, all of which left me as poor as I had entered on them. At times I remembered my desire to become a priest, but now it was over late to study. Also my hands were too much soiled with the affairs of the world. Wearying of the struggle, I went back to my village in the mountains, and dwelt there a while, but this also wearied me, having nothing to do, and I turned my attention to the management of mines. It was while I was thus employed, as a middle-aged man, that I made the acquaintance of James Strickland, who was destined to accompany me to the city heart of the world. End of chapter 1. By H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 2. The Señor Strickland. 22 years ago, I, Ignacio, visited a village in the state of Tamaulipas named Cumarvo, a beautiful place half hidden in pine forests among the mountains. I came to this hamlet because a friend of mine, one of the Brethren of the Order of the Heart, wrote to me saying that there was an Indian in the neighbourhood who had in his possession an ancient Aztec scroll, which, being in picture writing, neither he nor anyone else could read. This scroll had descended to the Indian through many generations, and with it a tradition that it told of a very rich gold mine in the mountains whereof the site was lost, which had been closed to save it from the grip of Cortes, by the order of Guatemoc, my forefather, whom the Spaniards murdered. May their souls be accursed. Now, I had been taught the secret of the picture writing by old Antonio, my father's friend, when first I was initiated into the mysteries of the heart, though it must die with me, for I believe that at this hour there is no other man living who can read it. This writing the Indian was willing to give up to me as Lord of the Heart, and accordingly, having nothing better to do, I journeyed to Cumarvo to study it. In this matter, as in many others, I was destined to meet with disappointment, at any rate for a while, for on my arrival at the house of my friend, I heard that the Indian had died of a sudden sickness, and that his son could not discover where the scroll was hidden. Another thing I heard also, namely, that a white man, an Inglesi, the first who ever visited these parts, had come to the village about 6 months before, and was engaged in working some old silver mines on behalf of a company, a task that he found difficult, for the Mexican owners of the land in the neighbourhood being jealous of him and angry because he paid his men a fair wage, with striving to prevent Indians from labouring in his mine. Now the natives of this place, from Monday morning to Saturday night, were a gentle and industrious people, but they had this fault, that on Saturday night many of them were accustomed to become drunk on mescal, the spirit that is distilled from the root of the aloe. Then their natures were changed, and fierce quarrels would spring up amongst them, for the most part about women, that ended often enough in bloodshed. It chanced that such a fray arose on the night of my arrival at Cumarvo. On the morrow I saw the fruits of it as I walked down the little street, which was bordered by white flat-roofed houses and paved with cobblestones, proposing to attend mass in the lime-washed church, where the bell rang night and day to scare evil spirits back to hell. In the middle of the street, lying in the shade of a house, were 2 dead men. A handsome Indian girl with a sullen and unmoved countenance was engaged in winding a serape or blanket round one of the bodies, but the other corpse lay unattended, certain stains upon the clothing revealing the manner of its end. On a doorstep sat a 3rd man, much wounded about the head and face, while the barber of the village, its only doctor, attempted to remove his hair with a pair of blunt scissors so that he might dress the cuts. The scene was dreadful, but no one took much notice of it, for Indian life is cheap, and in those days death by violence was even more common in Mexico than it is now. On the opposite side of the street, an old woman chaffered with a passer-by about the price of her oranges, while some children, with shouts and laughter, strove to lasso and drag away a pig that haunted the place, and a girl on her way to mass stepped over the uncovered body which lay so quiet in the shade, and, recognizing it as that of a friend, crossed herself as she hurried on. "What is the cause of this, señor?" I asked the barber. "I think that I have the honour of addressing Don Ignacio," the little man answered, and lifting his hands from their work, he made a sign showing that he also was a member of the Brotherhood, though a humble one. "I thought so," he went on as I gave the countersign. "We heard that you were going to visit us, and I am glad of it, for I weary of dressing wounds on Sunday, and perhaps you may be able to put a stop to these fights. The woman was the cause of it, of course, señor. These are not the first she has brought to their deaths," and he nodded at the girl who was wrapping the body in a blanket. "You see, she was going to marry this man," and he tapped the Indian whose wounds he was dressing on the shoulder. but she took up with that one, pointing through the nearest body. Whereupon number 1 here, being drunk with mescal, laid wait for number 2 and stabbed him dead. The girl who was with him ran for number 3 yonder, number 2's brother, but number 1 ambushed him, and so he was killed also. Then, hearing the noise, the village guard came up and cut down our friend here with their machetes, but as you see, unfortunately, they did not kill him. I heard, and anger took hold of me. Approaching the girl, I said, "This is your doing, woman? Are you not afraid?" "What of it?" she answered sullenly. "Can I help it if I am pretty, and men fight for me? Also, who are you to ask me whether I am afraid?" "Fool," cried the barber from the doorstep, "do you dare to speak thus to the Lord of the Heart?" The girl started and replied, "Why not? Is he then my lord?" "Listen, girl," I said, "others beside these have died through you." "How do you know that?" she answered. "But what need to ask? If you are the Lord of the Heart, you have the evil eye and can read secrets without their being discovered to you." "It is you that have the evil eye, woman, like many other of your sex," I said. "Hear me now. You will leave this place, and you will never return to it, for if you do, you die. Also remember that if harm should come to any more men on your account, wherever you go, I shall know it, and you will die there. Whoever you are not the government, and have no right to kill me," she said, trying to hide the fear which crept into her black eyes. "No, woman, I am not the government, but among our people I am more powerful than the government. If you do not believe me, ask the doctor yonder, and he will tell you that I should be obeyed even by people who had never seen me, where a troop of soldiers would be laughed at. If I say that you are to die, you will die in this way or in that, for my curse will be on you. Perhaps you may tumble over a precipice, or you may take a fever, or be drowned in crossing a river. Quien sabe?" "I know, Lord, I know," she whispered, shivering, for now she was frightened. "Do not look so terribly at me. Spare me this time, for I love our God. I did not mean to do it, but when men put their hearts into a woman's hand, how can she help squeezing them, especially if she hates men? But I did not hate this one," and she touched the cheek of the dead Indian caressingly. "I really meant to marry him. It is that fellow whom I hate," pointing to the wounded lover, "and I hope that he will be shot, else I think I shall poison him." "You will not poison him, woman, and though he deserves to die, you are worse than he. Now begone, and remember my words." Bending down, she touched the corpse's forehead with her lips, then rising, said, "I kiss your feet, Lord of the Heart," and went away without looking behind her, nor was she seen again in that village. Then, with a sigh, I also was turning to go, for it saddened me to think that when drink got hold of them, a woman should have the power to change these men, who are my brethren, into savage beasts, thirsting for each other's blood. I mused, had it not been for that other woman who had destroyed me and my hope, by now I had begun to teach them better. At this moment, looking up, I chanced to see a man such as I had never before beheld, standing by my side and gazing at me. Stories are told of how men and women, looking on each other for the first time, in certain cases, are filled with a strange passion of love, of which, come what may, they cannot again be rid. Among many misfortunes, thanks to be my guardian angels, this fate has never overtaken me. Yet at that moment I felt something that was akin to it, not love indeed, but a great sense of friendship and sympathy for and with this man, which, mastering me then, is still growing to this hour. though its object has for many years been dead. Perhaps it was the contrast between us that attracted me so much at first, since human beings are ever drawn towards their opposites in nature and appearance. I, my friend, for whom I write this history, as you will remember, although you have only known me in my age, am tall, thin, and sallow, like all my race, with a sad expression reflecting the heart within and melancholy eyes. Very different were the mind and the appearance of James Strickland, the Englishman. He was a fine man, over 30 years of age, short in proportion to his width, though somewhat spare in frame and slender in limb. His features were as clearly cut as those of an ancient god upon a marble wall. His eyes were as blue as the sea, and though just now they were troubled at the sight of death, merry like the eyes of a boy. His curling hair, for he had removed his hat in the presence of the dead, was yellow as mimosa bloom, darkening almost to red in the short beard, and about the ears where the weather had caught it, and beneath his shirt, which was open at the neck, the skin showed white like milk. For the rest, his hands were long and delicate, notwithstanding the hard work of which they bore traces. His glance was quick, and his smile the most pleasant that ever I had seen. "Your pardon, señor," said the Inglés in good Spanish, bowing to me as he spoke, "but unwittingly I have overheard some of your talk with yonder woman, and I cannot understand how it comes about that you, a stranger, have so much authority over her. I wish that you would explain it to me in order that I might learn how to put a stop to such matters. These dead men were two of my best workers, and I do not know where I shall look to replace them." "I cannot explain it, señor," I answered, returning his bow, "further than to say I have a certain rank among the Indians, on account of which they reverence me. Still, though I have no right to ask it of a stranger, I pray that you will forget any words of mine which may chance to have reached your ears, since of such authority the government is jealous." "Oh, by all means, señor. They are already forgotten. Well, adios. This sight is not so pleasant that I wish to study it," and replacing his hat upon his head, he passed on. Although my journey proved to be in vain, seeing that the scroll I came to read had vanished, I lingered in the village of Cumarvo, alleging as the reason of my stay a hope that it might be discovered, but really, as I believe, because I desired to become friendly with this white man. As it chanced, an opportunity was soon given me to do him a signal service. I have stated that there dwelt men of position in this place, Mexicans who were jealous of the Englishmen, and these people stirred up some discontented miners in his employ to make a plot to murder him, saying that if they did so they would win a great treasure which he kept hidden in his house. This plot came to my ears through one of the Brotherhood, and I determined to frustrate it, to which end I collected together 20 good men and true, and, arming them with guns, bade them be silent about the matter, above all to the Inglés, whom I did not wish to alarm. The plan of the murderers was at the hour of dawn to attack the house where the Señor Strickland slept, with 4 or 5 servants only, and to put all within its walls to death. Accordingly, about 1 o'clock on the night fixed, I dispatched my men by 2s and 3s, instructing them to go round the hills at the back of the house, and, creeping into the garden, hide themselves there among the trees till I appeared. An hour later I followed them myself without being observed by the spies of the attacking party, for rain fell and the night was very dark. Arriving in the garden, I collected my men and placed them in ambush under a low wall commanding the street, up which I knew the murderers must come. Here we waited patiently till the cocks crew and the dawn began to break in the east. Presently we heard a stir in the village beneath, as of men marching, and in the gathering light we saw the murderers creeping stealthily up the street, to the number of 50 or more. So great was their fear of the Englishman that they thought it safer to bring many men to kill him. Also, each of the villains desired that his neighbour should be a sharer in the crime. "Will you not wake up the Inglés?" asked a man next to me. "No," I answered. "It will be time enough to wake him when the affair is settled. Let none of you fire till I give the word." Now the brigands in the street below, men without shame, after waiting a little time for the light to grow stronger, advanced toward the gate, looking like a procession of monks, for the air was chilly, and each of them wore his serape wrapped around his head. In their hands they carried rifles and drawn machetes. Within 10 paces of the gate they paused for a minute to consult, and I heard their leader, a Mexican, direct half of them to creep round to the back of the house so as to cut off all escape. Then I whistled, which was the signal agreed upon, at the same time covering the Mexican with my rifle. Almost before the sound had left my lips there followed a report of 20 guns, and some 15 or 16 of the enemy were stretched upon the ground. For a moment they wavered, and I thought that the rest of them were going to fly, but this they dared not do, for they knew that they had been seen. Therefore they rushed at the wall with a yell, firing as they came. As they climbed over it, we met them with pistol shots and machetes, and for a few minutes the affair was sharp, for they were desperate and outnumbered us. Still they lost many men in scaling the wall and forcing the gate, and with exemption of 14 who fled and were for the most part caught afterwards, the rest of them we finished amongst the flowers and vegetables of the garden. Just as all was over, the Englishman, who was a sound sleeper, appeared yawning, dressed in white, and holding a pistol in his hand. "What is this noise?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "And why are you people fighting in my garden? Go away, all of you, or I shall shoot at you." "I trust," I said, bowing, "that the señor will pardon us for disturbing him in his slumber, but this matter could not be settled without some noise. May I offer the señor my serape? The air is chilly, and he will catch cold in that dress." "Thank you," he said, putting on the serape. "And now perhaps you will explain why you come to spoil my garden by making a battlefield of it." Then I told him, and was astonished to see that as I went on he grew very angry. "I suppose that I must thank you, gentlemen, for saving my life," he said at last, "though I never asked you to do it. But all the same I think it shameful that you should have had this fight in my own garden without giving me the opportunity of sharing it. Caramba! Am I a little girl that I should be treated in such a way?" And of a sudden he burst out laughing and shook me by the hand. That day, when all the trouble was over and the place had been made tidy, the Señor Strickland sent a man to ask if I would do him the pleasure to dine with him. I accepted, and as we sat smoking after dinner, having talked of the fight till we were tired of it, he spoke thus to me: "Don Ignacio, I owe you my life, and believe me, I am grateful, for I do not see why you should have risked so much for a foreign stranger." "I did it because I like you, señor," I answered. "Also because it is very pleasant to catch the wicked in their own toils. Those who perished this morning were villains, every one of them. They came in the hope of plunder, for such men without shame will murder human beings for $5 a head. But they were set on by others who hate you because you treat your Indian workmen fairly, and also because they do not wish foreigners here to compete with them, and think that you are but the first bird of the flock. Therefore they thought that it would be a good policy to kill you so as to frighten away others who might follow. However, That danger has gone by, and you need have no more fear, for they have learnt a lesson which they will not forget." "So much the better, then," he answered, "for I have troubles enough to deal with here without being bothered to protect my life against such contemptible vermin. Now, Don Ignatio, I hardly like to ask you, and I dare say that you will think the offer beneath contempt, but are you willing to accept an engagement? I am sadly in need of sub-manager, or one who could control the Indians, and to such a man I am prepared to pay $100 a month. The funds of the company I represent will not allow me to offer more." I thought for a while and answered, "Señor, the money is not enough to tempt me, though it will serve to buy food, lodging, and cigars. But I accept your offer for the same reason that I fought your battles this morning, because I like you, and will gladly do my best to serve you in your interest. Still, I must warn you that, for aught I know, I may have to leave your service at short notice, for my time is not altogether my own. I also am the servant of a great company, señor, and though now I am on leave, as it were, and have been for many years, I may be required at any moment." Thus it was, then, that I entered the service of the Señor James Strickland, or rather of his company, in which I continued for something more than a year, working very hard, for the señor did not spare either me or himself. But as the records of these months of fruitless labour could have little interest for you, my friend, instead of writing of them, I will tell you in a few words what was the history of this Englishman as he told it to me. He was of noble blood, as might have been seen in his face, for he had a right to be addressed as honourable, which it would seem means more in England than it does here. Nevertheless, his father was a priest of the heretic church, and quite poor, though how this came about you, being an Englishman, will understand better than I, seeing that in most countries it is the privilege of nobles to enrich themselves at the expenses of others of less rank. At any rate, when James Strickland's father died, his son, who was then a lad of 20, found that he possessed in the world no more than $5,000. This sum, being of adventurous mind and sanguine temperament, he invested in a ranch in Texas, where he endured much danger and hardship, and lost all his money. After this experience, having nothing to live on and no friends, he was obliged to labour with his hands like a peon, and this he did in many ways. He broke horses, he herded cattle. Once even, for 2 months, he sank so low, it makes me angry to write of it, as to be forced to wait upon the guests in an inn at Panama. Thence he drifted to Nicaragua and became mixed up in mining ventures, and when first I met him he had been a miner for 10 years. Most of this time he spent managing a mine for an American in the Chontilis country on the frontier of Honduras, where the fever is so bad that few white men can live. Here it was that he learned to speak Spanish and the Indian or Maya tongue. At length, after an attack of fever which nearly killed him, he left Honduras and came to Mexico, where he accepted the management of the silver mine at Cumarvo. Hitherto it had been worked by a Mexican on behalf of its owners, who dismissed the rogue for stealing ore and selling it. This mine, though very rich, was hard to deal with profitably because of the water gathered in it in all the months that Señor Strickland had been its captain. He was employed in driving a tunnel upward from a lower level in the cliff in order to drain the workings. Shortly after I came into his service, this tunnel was finished, for now I was able to obtain plenty of labour which before he had lacked, and we began to bring to bank ore running as high as 200 ounces to the ton, so that for some months all went well. Then, of a sudden, The ore body dipped straight downward as though it had been bent when hot, and we followed it till the water increased so much that we were unable to carry it out, for in those days there were no steam pumps in Mexico, such as there are now, used for the drying of mines. First we tried to strike another vein, but without success. Then we attempted to pierce a second drainage tunnel at a still lower level, but after more than 3 months' labour the rock became so hard that we were obliged to abandon the task. Now there was nothing to be done except to stop work at the tunnel and report the matter by letter to the owners of the mine, employing ourselves meanwhile in the smelting of such ore as we had stacked. This, indeed, we needed to do in order to pay wages with the silver, seeing that after the first few months the owners ceased to remit us money. One evening, on returning from the smelting works to the house, I found Señor Strickland, his chin resting on his hand, and an unlighted cigar in his mouth, seated at the table on which lay an open letter. All through our misfortunes and heavy labour he had never lost heart or forgotten to smile and be merry, but now he looked sad as a man who has just buried his mother, and I asked him what evil thing had happened. "Nothing particular, Ignacio," he answered, but listen here," and he read the letter aloud. It was from one of the owners of the mine, and this was the purport of it: that the shaft had become choked with water because of the incompetence and neglect of the señor, that they, the owners, hereby dismissed him summarily, refusing to pay him the salary due, and lastly, that they held him responsible in his own person for such money as they had lost. "Surely," I cried in wrath, when he had finished, "this letter was written by a man without shame, and I pray that he may find his grave in the stomachs of hogs and vultures," for I forgot myself in my indignation against those that could speak thus of the señor, who had slaved day and night in their service, giving him no rest. "Oh, do not trouble, Ignacio," he said with a little smile. "It is the way of the world. I have failed and must take the consequences. Had I succeeded, there would have been a different story. Still, I think that if ever I meet this man again, I will kick him for telling lies about me. Do you know, Ignacio, that with the exception of $1,000 which remains to my credit in Mexico, I have spent all my own money that I had saved upon this mine, and of that $1,000, 800 are due to you for back pay, so whatever trade I take to next, I shall not begin as a rich man." "Be silent, I beg of you, señor," I answered, "for such words make my ears burn. What? Am I also a thief, that I should rob you, you who have already plucked like a fowl for the good of others? Insult me once more by such thoughts, and I will never pardon you." Then I left the house to calm myself by walking among the mountains, little knowing what I should hear before I entered it again. World by H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 3. The Summons. As I walked down the street of the village, I met my friend with whom I had stayed when first I came to Cumarvo. "Ah, Lord," he said, "for those who are initiated among the Indians give me this title when none are by. I was seeking you. The scroll has been found." "What scroll?" The picture writing about the ancient mine which brought you here. You remember that he who owned the document died, and his son could not discover its whereabouts. Well, yesterday he found it by chance while he was hunting rats in the roof of his house, and brought it to me. Here it is." And he gave me a roll wrapped in yellow linen. Good, I answered. I will study it tonight, and continued my walk, thinking little more about the matter, for my mind was full of other things. The air was pleasant and the evening fine, so that I did not return to the house till the moon rose. As I passed up the path, a man stepped so suddenly from the shelter of a bush in front of me that I drew my /machete, thinking that he meant to do me mischief. "Stay your hand, lord," said the man, saluting me humbly, and at the same time giving the sign of brotherhood. "It is many years since we met, so perchance you may have forgotten me. Still, you will remember my name. I am Molas, your foster brother." Then I looked at him in the moonlight and knew him, though time had changed us both, and putting my arms round him, I embraced him, seeing that he had been faithful when many deserted me, and I loved him as today I love his memory. "What brings you here, Molas?" I asked. "When last I heard of you, you were dwelling far away in Chiapas." "A strange matter. Business of the heart, O Lord of the Heart, which I deem so pressing that I have journeyed over land and sea to find you. Have you a place where I can speak with you alone?" "Follow me," I said, wondering, and led him to my own chamber, where I gave him food and drink, for he was weary with travel. "Now set out this business," I said. "First, show me the token, lord. I desire to see it once more for a purpose of my own." I rose and closed the shutters of the window. Then I bared my breast, revealing the ancient symbol. For a while he gazed upon it and said, "It is enough. Tell me, lord, what is the saying that has descended with this trinket?" "The saying is, Molas, that when this half that I wear is reunited with the half that is wanting, then the Indians shall rule again from sea to sea, as they did when the heart was whole." "That is the saying, lord. We learn it in the ritual that is called opening of the heart, do we not? And in this ritual that half which you wear is named Day, since it can be seen, and the half which is lost is named Night, since, though present, it is not seen, and it is told to us that day and the night together will make one perfect circle, wherefore the centre is named Heart of Heaven, of which these things are the symbol. Is it not so?" "It is so, Molas." "Good. Now listen. That which was lost is found. The half which is named Night has appeared in the land, for I have seen it with my eyes, and it is to tell you of it that I have travelled hither." "Speak on," I said. "Lord, yonder in Chiapas there is a ruined temple that the Antiguos built, and to that temple have come a man and a woman, his daughter. The man is old and fierce-eyed, a terrible man, and the girl is beautiful exceedingly. There in the ruins they have dwelt these 4 months or more, and the man practises the art of medicine, for he is a great doctor and has wrought many cures, though he takes no money in payment for his skill, but food only. Now it chanced, lord, that my wife, whom I married but 2 years ago, was very sick, so sick that the village doctor could do nothing for her. Therefore the fame of the old Indian who dwelt in the ruined temple having reached me, I determined to visit him and seek his counsel, or, if possible, to bring him to my home. When my wife heard of it, she said it was of no use, as she saw death sitting at the foot of the bed. Still, I kissed her and went, leaving her in charge of the padre of the village and some woman, her sisters. With me I took a lock of her hair and some fowls and eggs as a present to the Lacandone, for they said that, though of our race, this doctor was not a Christian. Starting before dawn, I travelled all day by the river and through the forest till at evening I came to the ruined temple which I knew, and began to climb its broken stair. As I neared the top, a man appeared from beneath the leaning arch that is the gateway of the stair, and stood gazing at the ball of the setting sun. He was an aged man, clad in a linen robe only, very light in colour, with long white beard and hair, a nose hooked like a hawk's beak, and fierce eyes that seemed to pierce those he looked upon, and to read their most secret thoughts. "Greeting, brother," he said, speaking in our own tongue, but with a strange accent, and using many words which are unknown to me. "What brings you here?" Then he looked at me a while, and asked slowly, "Say, brother, are you sick at heart?" Now, Lord, when I heard those words, wherefore you know the meaning, I was so astounded that I almost fell backwards down the ruined stair, but recovering myself, I tried him with a sign, and lo, he answered it. Then I tried him with the second sign, and the third, and the fourth, and so on up to the 12th, and he answered them all, though not always as we use them. Then I paused. He said, "You have passed the door of the sanctuary. Enter, brother, and draw on to the altar." But I shook my head, for I could not. Next he tried me with various signs and strange words that have to do with the inmost mysteries, but I was not able to answer them, though at times I saw their drift. "You have some knowledge," he said, "yet you do but stand at the foot of the pyramid, whereas I watch the stairs from the crest, warming my hands at the eternal fire." "None of my order have more, lord," I answered, "save the very highest." "Then there are higher in the land?" he asked eagerly, but started suddenly and looked round, went on without waiting for an answer. "You are in sorrow, child of the heart, and have come from one who is sick to this death. To your business, and perchance we will speak of these matters afterwards." "First, lord," I said, "I have brought an offering," and I set down the basket at his feet. "Gifts are good between brethren," he replied. "Moreover, in this barren place food is welcome. Come hither, daughter, and take what this stranger brings." As he spoke, a lady came forward through the archway, dressed like her father in a white robe of fine fabric, but somewhat worn. I looked at her, and it is truth, lord, that for the second time I went near falling, for so great was the loveliness of this girl that my heart turned to water within me. Never before had I seen or even dreamed of such beauty in a woman. "To your tale, Molas, to your tale. What has the fashion of a woman's beauty to do with the business of the heart?" I broke in angrily. "I do not know, lord," he answered, "and yet I think that it has to do with all earthly things." Then he continued, "The lady, whose name was Maya, looked at me carelessly and took the basket. Following her through the archway to the terrace beyond, I set out the matter of my wife's illness to the doctor, or rather to him who passes as a doctor, and who is named Zibalbay, or Watcher, praying that he would come to the village and minister to her. He listened in silence, then took the lock of her hair that I had brought with me, and going to a fire that burned near by, he laid some of the hair upon an ember and watched it as it writhed and shrivelled away. "It would be of little use, brother," he said sadly, "seeing that your wife is now dead. I felt her spirit pass us as we talked together in the gateway. Still, until I burnt the hair, I did not know whether it was she who went by or another. Here I may tell you, lord, that, as I found afterwards, my wife departed at that very hour of sunset, though whether the doctor Zibalbay guessed that she must die then from the symptoms which I described to him, or whether he has the spirit sight and saw her, I do not know. Still, it seems natural that at that moment of her passing she should come to bid farewell to the husband whom she loved, though I think it is a bad omen for me, and I pray that I may never see that place again. At the least, when I heard him speak thus, I did not doubt his truth, for something within me confirmed it, but I hid my face and groaned aloud in the bitterness of my grief. Then, taking my hand, Zibalbay the watcher spoke great words to me in a solemn voice that seemed to soothe me as the song of a mother soothes a restless child, for he talked with certainty as one who has knowledge and vision of those who have gone beyond, telling me that this parting was not for long, and that soon I should find her whom I had lost, made glorious and folded close to the heart of heaven. Then he laid his hand upon my head, and I slept a while, to wake sad indeed, but filled with a strange peace. "Food is ready, my brother," said Zibalbay. "Eat and rest here this night. Tomorrow you can return." Now when we had eaten, Zibalbay spoke to me in the presence of his daughter, who, though a woman, is also of the order, saying, "You are of our brotherhood, therefore the words I speak will be repeated to none who are not brethren, for I speak upon the heart." "I hear with the ears, Lord," I answered. "Listen," he went on. "I come from far with this maiden, my daughter, and we are not what we seem, but who and what we are now is not the hour to tell. This is the purpose of our coming, to find that which is one but divided, that which is not lost but hidden. Perchance, brother, you can point the path to it." And he paused and looked at me with his piercing eyes. Now, Lord, I understand to what his words had reference, for are they not part of the ritual of the service, opening of the heart? Still, because I desired to be sure and not commit myself, I picked up a piece of burnt wood, and, as though in idleness, bent down, and, by the light of the fire, I drew the half of the heart with a saw-like edge upon the pavement of the chamber where we sat. Then I handed the stick to Zibalbay, who took it and passed it to his daughter, saying, "I have no skill at such arts. Finish it, Maya." She smiled, and kneeling down, traced the half of the face within the outline that I had drawn, saying, "Is it enough, or do you need the writing also?" "It is enough," I answered. "Now, Lord, what do you desire?" "I desire to know where that which is hidden can be brought to light, and if it dwells in this land, for I have journeyed far to seek it." "It dwells here," I answered, "for I have beheld it with my eyes, and he guards it whom is its keeper." "Can you lead me to him, brother?" "No, for I have no such commands. But perhaps I can bring him to you, though I must journey by sea and land to find him, that is, if he wills to come." "Say, what message shall I give? That a stranger whom I have met desires to look upon the holy symbol? It will scarcely bring him so far." "Nay, tell him that the hour is come for night and day to be joined together, that a new sun may shine in a new sky." "I can tell him this, but will he believe it, seeing that I have no proof? Will he not rather think that some cunning stranger and false brother lays a plot to trap him? Give him proofs, lords, or I do not start upon this errand." "Will he believe that which you have seen with your eyes?" "He will believe it, for he has trusted me from childhood." "Then look," said the man, and opening his robe at his neck, he kneeled down in the light of the fire. There, Lord, upon his breast hung that which has been hidden from our sight since the sons of Quetzal, the god, ruled in the land, the counterpart of the severed symbol which is upon your breast. That is all my story, Lord." Now I, Ignacio, listened amazed, for the thing was marvellous. "Did the man send me no further message?" I asked. "None. He said that if you were the true keeper of the mystery you would come to learn his mission from himself, or bring him to you." "And did you tell him anything of me and my history, Molas?" "Nothing. I had no such command. On the morrow at dawn I left to bury my wife if she were dead, or to nurse her if she still were sick, saying that so soon as might be I would travel to the city of Mexico to seek out the Keeper of the Heart and give him this tidings, and that within 8 weeks or less I trusted to report how I had fared. The old man asked me if I had money, and without waiting to be answered he gave me 2 handfuls of lumps of moulded gold from a hide bag, wherefore each lump was stamped with the symbol of the heart. "Let me see one," I said. "Alas, my lord Ignacio, I have none. Not far from the ruined temple where this Zibalbay and his daughters sojourned is the hacienda of Santa Cruz, and there, as you may have heard, dwell a gang of men under the leadership of one Don Pedro Moreno, who are by profession smugglers, highway robbers, and murderers, though they pretend to earn a living by the cultivation of coffee and cocoa. As it chanced, in journeying homeward, I fell into the hands of some of these men. They searched me, and finding the lumps of gold in my pocket, handed them over to Don Pedro himself, who rode up when he saw that they had the fish in their net. He examined the gold closely and asked me whence it came. At first I refused to answer, whereupon he said that I should be confined in a dungeon at the hacienda until such time as I chose to speak. Then, being mad to get back to my village and learn the fate of my wife, I found my tongue and spoke the truth, saying that the gold was given in exchange for food by an old Indian doctor who dwelt with his daughter in the ruined temple in the forest. "Mother of Heaven," said Don Pedro, "I have heard of this man before, but now I know the kind of merchandise in which he trades. I think that I must pay him a visit and learn what mint it was stamped at." Then, having plucked me bare as a fowl for the oven, they let me go without hurt, but often I have sorrowed because in my hour of haste and need I told them whence the gold came, since I fear lest I should have let loose these villains upon the old wanderer and his daughter, and in that case they may well be murdered before ever you can reach them. "Doubtless Heaven will protect them," I answered, "though you acted foolishly. But tell me, Molas, how did you find me out and come here without money?" "I had some money at home, lord, and when I had buried my wife I travelled to Frontera on the coast, where I found a ship bound for Vera Cruz, and in her I sailed, giving my service as a sailor, which is a trade that I have followed. From Vera Cruz I made my way to Mexico, and reported myself to the head of the Brotherhood in that city, who, as I expected, was able to give me tidings of you. Then I came on to this village and arrived here tonight, having been a month and 2 days on my journey. And now, lord, if you can, give me a place to sleep in, since I am weary, who for 3 days have scarcely shut my eyes. Tomorrow you can let me know what answer I must bear to the old man Zibalbay." I, Ignacio, sat late that night pondering over these tidings, which filled me with a strange hope. Could it be that my hour of success was at hand after so many years of waiting? If there were truth in prophecies, it would seem so, and yet my faith wavered. This traveller whom Molas had seen might be a madman, and his symbol might be forged. I could not tell, but at least I would put the matter to the proof, for tomorrow, or so soon as was possible, I would journey down to Chiapas and seek him out. Thinking thus, I threw myself upon my bed and strove to sleep, but could not. Then, remembering the scroll that my friend had given me, I rose, purporting to change my thoughts in studying it and to win sleep. It was a hard task, but at length I mastered its meaning and found that it dealt with a mine near Cumarvo, and described the exact position of the mouth of the tunnel. This mouth, it would appear, had been closed up in the reign of Guatemoc, and the scroll was written by the cacique who had charge of the mine in those days, in order that a record might remain that would enable his descendants to reopen it should a time come when the Spaniards were driven from the land. That the mine was very rich in free gold was shown by the weights of pure metal stated in this scroll to have been sent year by year to the court of Montezuma by this cacique, and also by the fact that it was thought worth hiding from the Spaniards. Early on the morrow I went to the room of the Señor Strickland and spoke to him with a heavy heart. "Señor," I said, "you will remember that when I entered your service I told you that I might have to leave at any moment. Now I am here to say that that time has come, for a messenger has arrived to summon me to the other end of Mexico upon business of which I may not speak, and tomorrow I must start upon the journey." "I am sorry to hear it, Ignatio," he answered, "for you have been a good friend to me. Still, you do well to separate your fortune from those of an unlucky man." "And you, señor, do ill to speak thus of me," I answered with indignation. "Still, I forgive you, because I know that at times, when the heart is sore, the mouth utters words that are not meant. Listen, señor, when you have eaten your breakfast, will you take a ride with me?" "Certainly, if you like, but whither do you wish to ride?" "To another mine that is, or should be, about 2 hours on horseback from here, in a valley at the foot of yonder peak. I only heard of it last night, though I came to Cumarvo to seek it, and it would seem that it is very rich in Montezuma's day." "In Montezuma's day?" he said. "Yes, it was last worked then, and I propose that if we can find it, and it looks well, that you should denounce it for yourself, giving a reward of a few dollars to the Indian from whom I had the information, who is a poor man." "But if it is so good, why don't you denounce it, Ignatio? And how did you come to hear about it after all these years?" "For 2 reasons, señor. First, because I wish to do you a service, if it is in my humble power. Secondly, because I cannot look after it and must leave you, though to do so will be a true grief to me, for, if you will permit me to say it, never have I met a man for whom I conceived a greater respect and affection. Perhaps if I return again you will give me a share in the profits, so that we may grow rich together. Now I will show you how I came to hear of the mine." Then I fetched the scroll with the translation that I had made and read it to him. He listened eagerly, for, like yourself, Señor Jones, your countryman, James Strickland, loved adventure and all things that have to do with the past of this ancient land. "Let us go at once," he said when I finished. "I will order the horses and a mule with the prospecting kit to get ready. Shall we take men with us?" "I think not, señor. The mine is not yet found, and the less talk there is about it, the better, for if the matter is noised abroad, somebody may be before you in denouncing it. The messenger who came to see me last night is a trusty man, but he is weary with journeying and rests, so we will go alone." An hour later we were riding among the mountains, I having left a message for Molas to say that I should return before dark. The trail which we were following was a difficult one, and ran for some miles along the edge of a precipice till it reached the crest of the range. Indeed, so bad was it in parts that we were forced to dismount and drive the horses and mule before us, while we followed, clinging to the ferns and creepers on the rocks to keep ourselves from falling. At length we came to the summit of the range and turned downwards through a forest of oak and fir trees, heading for a valley that lay at the base of a solitary mountain peak, along which ran a stream. Down this stream we rode a mile or more, since I was searching for a certain pointed rock that was mentioned in the scroll as standing by itself on the slope of a mountain where no trees grew, beneath which should be the glen where in the days of Guatemoc was a great ceiba tree that, so said the writing, overshadowed the mouth of the mine. Riding up through the dense grove of oaks, we came presently to the glen that lay just below the slope whereupon stood the tall rock. "This must be the place," I said, "but I see no ceiba tree." "Oh, doubtless it has fallen and rotted since those days," answered Señor Strickland. "Let us tether the horses and search." This we did, and the hunt was long, for here grasses and ferns grew thick, but at length I discovered a spot where the trunk of a very ancient tree had decayed in the ground, so that nothing remained except the outline of its circle and some of the larger roots. Round about these roots we sought desperately for an hour or more, but without avail. At length my companion grew weary of this sport and went to pull up a small grassy-leaved palm that he had discovered, proposing to take it home and set it in his garden, for he was a great lover of plants and flowers. While he was thus engaged, I toiled amongst the grasses, looking for the mouth of the mine, which, as I began to think, was lost for ever. Suddenly he called out, "Come here, Ignatio. Beneath the roots of this palm is refuse rock that has been broken with hammers. I believe this must have been the platform in front of the mine. One can see that the ground was flat here." I came to him, and together we renewed our search, till at length, by good luck, we discovered a hole immediately beneath the rock large enough for a man to creep into. "Was this made by a coyote, or is it the mouth of the mine?" the señor asked. "That we can only find out by entering it," I answered. "Doubtless when they shut down the mine the /antiguos/ would have left some such place as this to ventilate the workings. Bring the pickaxe, señor, and we will soon see." For 10 minutes or more we laboured, working in solid ground with pick and spade, till we bared the side of the tunnel, which I examined. "There is no need to trouble farther," I said. "This rock has been cut with copper chisels, and here is the green of the copper. Without doubt we have found the mouth of the mine. Now give me the hammer and candles, and bring the leather bag for samples, and we will enter." End of chapter 3.